saw the Suspicious Film performance. I think it was doubled with Ken Russell's The Devils. It was at the theater where Galiftes now is, Strand Theater in Squirrel Hill, an Israeli neighborhood. I was 14 years old and unbelievably sick. And it ends with a dead Jagger in the closet or something. Like, it's centerpiece of film research into Lennon's John Hancock behind the scenes on the Houdini he pulled. I'd like to try to reason with a person who has a reasonable concept of Mick Jagger, because he's unreasonable people. But there are reasonable people around who just like him. And they have an image of him as a reasonable person, built from bits and pieces of his rock career. They think wonders of him. This magical unicorn dude was so bold as to blame a battered deaf child for a concept art thingamajig that led into whodunit crowd behind the scenes with Reagan and Francis Ford Coppola and Trumpy Toon's huge yachts of gold steamrolled into the history books and sort of dusted it off as not truism when it came to me. They took a battered deaf man and gleefully castrated him while making protestations of their undying sexuality, taunting me with HIV injection over the concept art of two virgins. And to prove himself a leader of the trannies, Clint Eastwood engaged in womanly gossip, whisper campaigns that strained the grapevines with their Holocaustal infamies, sniveling that I framed Reagan so he had the right to frame me. I did no such thing. This is all Yoko Ono's crusade to avenge a symbol in her psyche, a chosen youth from the San Jacinto, and George Bush picked his nose gleefully and egged it on. A symbol from his ship. I'm not looking for him to defend me. And they have quanked and yammered through cheap cop trick after cheap cop trick. Do you remember those stories of the people who would travel through the South looking new generation in the 60s and 70s, would have a cop stop them and plant drugs on them? Well, Mick Jagger's Israeli friends were doing that to me, and he was loving every bit of it. They traumatized and attacked me blindside, where administration said, as long as you keep the peace yourself, you might have a voice in your own affairs. That's quite a box to put somebody in. They want to hit me and see Jimmy cry or fight back or become a Peabody warrior, and untie his sissiness. And that is a hot wire concept system. It goes through as an override circuit, blotting out and erasing everything that happened. The Penis Gabriel and Oliver Stone have paid gargantuan sums of money to drama clubs out of Hollywood to put on little shows, like look-alike shows of the kids who had pot in their coat. And say he took a puff, he owes us $1. With the help of the pigs. It's all networked through police administration. The biggest crowd in the Rolling Stones menagerie, his biggest draw, is off-duty policemen, particularly those who were fired for being drunks or battering a fellow cop. The dangerous drunken amusement park of whoring and casinos in the United States of America are their big celebrity draw. Now he sits peachy keen on Regal High, implicated by show business in the production system of a red carpet that took Kennedy and shoved him aside to make way for the sex, drugs, and rock and roll lockdown on the 60s peace movement. That was a lockdown. Hair, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles locked down on the 60s peace movement. Revolution number 9 was shooting Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. It's clear from the script Netanyahu planted on me. Perfectly clear. Now he sits up in his regal chair surrounded by clouds. He says, "Get off my cloud. This is my mansion of clouds." And he has lines of skinhead warriors, and Screwdriver and Roger Waters. You know, the do it my way man when it comes to Gaza, who hates public schools. Now, you notice I have a very loving picture of Greta Thunberg on my wall. I'm going to walk back to my books for a second. I don't own any guns. Don't worry. I'm not going to pull nothing on you. I don't have a laser beam that's going to, I'm getting out of the way to zap you through the TV. None of that. Okay, I'll keep my hands up. Slow down, Vic. Slow down, Roger. Okay, I got my hands up. I'm just... Right next to my Greta Thunberg book. It's my father's second book, maybe, from the 40s, when he was at Columbia with Teachers College with Eisenhower, who he knew. America's Stake in Human Rights. And he built schools. He made it possible. Don't worry, the same kick still goes. He made it possible for his son to be appreciative enough to read JFK. He made it possible for me to redeem my broken self and get into college in an honor society. He was one of the people who was willing to offer to allow these creepy rock stars to be dissertated on if the history department would cooperate. He suggested a dissertation title to me of God, Guns, and Rock and Roll. And these people talk about we don't need no education, we don't need no thought control. And so anybody who is humane about even them has to get. They're psychopaths. You could see that from Gaza. It's shameless not to call them that. Now, I'm going to come back and discuss this matter a little more before I sign off. I'm sure my father would have approved of Greta and her movement. to restore some sense and sustainability to climate change. On his deathbed, he told me the saddest thing of all was not to have faith or confidence in the continuation of life on Earth. And so it was a whole foreclosing in the universe. Okay, that's my father. He drove a school bus. While these tripped out people cheered a man who recklessly drove around the school bus and tagged me, the villain, because I was white, protesting that he was doing this, infuriated that he was doing this. So Mick Jagger became crowned the Black African warrior. He's an ancestor. He's a great king, like Osiris of Egypt. In fact, hot rocks, or through a glass darkly, or hot rocks too, is the equivalent of Sanskrit. Hieroglyphs, man. And the stadiums are full of the people who carry their stones to build pyramids to the rock stars of grandeur. I'll tell you quite honestly, Gimme Shelter made me sick, but I thought that they were courageous for trying to break down what happened afterwards. I liked them and admired them on that note. But I didn't identify with them. I couldn't quite grasp what the big deal was. In fact, I came to the conclusion that that was the big deal, that people just sit there unable to grasp what the big deal is and flock to it. And I backed out. I wasn't that interested. One of those things I try to shake from my head. I saw them in Philadelphia, and he could wiggle still. Neat. He was the Sylvester Stallone of reptile people. Neat. He summons a virgin to crucify somebody who King Crimson had reason to sanctify. I loved them and hitchhiked from Pittsburgh from St. Louis just to hear them play. Rock stars have their place, I felt. I don't really anymore. I find it unbelievably sadistic that Tony Levin has tuned all of the parameters to queer balls. No. We're going to orchestrate and precipitate a no. He's not going to want to join King Crimson anymore. Hawkwind has shown him the light. These are tripped out weirdos who have no business poaching the child of a humanist with the help of Franklin Graham and a whole dizzy network, Michael Sallows, the whole criminal enterprise of weird military religion in the state of Pennsylvania that gobbled Mackenzie Shirella for their satisfaction. No business. They made up a story so they could say I was to blame for John Lennon's murder, so they could perpetuate the people who wrote the script. Isn't it strange to you? I don't show my pornography collection. I'm not ashamed of it to anybody, much less children or elderly people. It's just the fact that I have been raised to try to take care of my body. That's all. Isn't it strange to you that Pecker Boy wants to have a pornographic genocide and incinerate people who use it and start sending in Mike Johnson? Because believe me, Mike Johnson and Mick Jaggers are cahooters. Just like Reagan and Yoko Ono and Lennon were cahooters. Mike Johnson flips out at Columbia students for wanting some sentiment of dignity left over from Franklin Roosevelt and JFK to command our society instead of this abomination What did Mick Jagger do? He went to Tel Aviv to prance around and encourage Israeli Zionist berserkers. Yes. And his little menagerie has the who didn't want to come to Woodstock too. Oh, we're so sorry we didn't get to see you.